All right, let's move on to types of listening. First type of listening is informational listening. That's actually listening to learn something. In theory, that's what you're doing right now, is taking notes, paying attention, trying to pick up what I have to say. You're not necessarily evaluating what I'm saying. You're not going over it and all that stuff. You're just documenting it. The next one is critical listening. Now that is when you're actually trying to sort out and say, is this truthful? Is this factual? Does this match with what's the facts state? Those kind of things. We're critically analyzing what's being said. When we listen to the news, this is what we should be doing. When we're watching ads, this is what we should be doing. This is the kind of listening that we should be paying attention to. So we're analyzing it. Are we looking at it? We're paying attention to it. The next one is empathic listening. This is the idea of listening for emotions. We've talked about empathy in the past, but this is the idea of what is going on. We're going to pay attention to your emotions. We're going to listen. We're going to hear. We usually, when we're empathic listening, we're using a form of active listening, but we're going to actually listen in order to have the person be heard. It's what we'll do in mediation when we get to that. It's what you should do when you're talking to a friend when they have a problem. They come, they talk to you. They're not looking for a solution. They're not looking for resolutions. They're just listening to be heard. The next one is appreciative listening. That's when you listen to comedy or music or whatever, even the news sometimes. You're just literally just listening to it to hear. It's because you want to appreciate it. You want to enjoy it. With the last one being rapport listening. Now, the key element about rapport listening is that it actually uses all of the other elements. Rapport listening is the idea of, let's pick a salesman. When they're talking to you, they are listening for key elements that work for you, for them. They want to understand what's going on. They want to know you. They want to be able to use your likes and dislikes to their advantage to sell you whatever product they're trying to sell. So when you talk to a used car salesman and they find out that you have 3 kids and they're listening and you go here and you go there, they're going to try to sell you on a bigger vehicle. When you say you make a comment, a little snide remark about soccer moms or something like that, they're probably going to steer away from the minivan and go for the SUV. So these are the things. When you're listening to people, you're building rapport. You want to build rapport. So you're going to use empathic listening. You listen for their emotions. You're going to critically analyze what they're having to say. You're listening for information. And of course, you're appreciating what they have to say. Now, moving on from that, we're going to move into active listening. Active listening is actually a whole series of skills and elements and things that we're going to talk about. But it's the ability to focus completely on the speaker, leaning in, understanding, pay attention, understanding their message, to comprehend the information and respond thoughtfully. This is a set of skills. Empathic listening uses a lot of these skills. Critical listening uses a lot of these skills. All of them do, but so let's talk about some of these things. So some of the signs of being active listening are facial expressions. When you're paying attention and you say things, you're looking at the way people look. You're looking at how they're sad or whatever. You're trying to get a feel for what they're saying because you're trying to absorb not just the words that they're saying, but also their emotions and the things behind them. It could be a matter of eye contact. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to this. Eye contact matters. How you look at somebody and how, the level you do, the level you don't. We talked about that nonverbal. If you're the one talking, it should be 60 to 70%. If you're the one listening, it should be 80, 90%. It's also posture. It's how you carry yourself. If you're all slumped over like in this meme, fine. But if you're actually up and standing upright, it changes how people appear to you. And then we can also mirroring. You can tell when someone's listening to you because as you do things, they do things. It's one of those things that it's just unconsciously done. You can do it to fake it or make it feel like it, but it can feel forced. And the last one is distractions. Eliminate distractions because if you're sitting there playing on your phone like we showed earlier and you're doing these things, people don't feel like you're actually listening to them. So put down so if someone's actively listening to you, they put down their phone, they put the other things away, they're leaning in, they're doing the stuff, and all those things. So let's talk about some of these tools that we're going to get into on active listening. First and foremost, let's talk about that posture. Are you standing up straight? Are you slumped down? What are you doing? Are we when you're sitting there talking, are you leaning back and relaxed and kicked back and trying to do that? Or are you leaning forward and looking engaged and listening to this person? Okay. Now let's think about eye contact. Are you making eye contact? Are you looking anywhere but their eyes? Are you darting around? You're trying to do anything you can to avoid eye contact? Are you staring them down to the point that it's just like creepy, annoying? So we got to look at this. And then, of course, you've got the next one, which is just making good eye contact. Now, I will tell you, when I'm doing mediations, I have to explain to the people that this is a situation that I have to deal with because I suffer from ADD. Therefore, if I'm making too much eye contact with you, if I'm looking at you, I get easily distracted because I start looking at everything around me. So a lot of times I have to look down. But our society believes that if you aren't making eye contact, then obviously you are shifty, you're not paying attention. So you need to be aware of what eye contact you're making. Next one is pay attention to your hands. Like I said, I'm not one much for eye contact, so I have to look down. I tend not to want to take a whole lot of notes because that's distracting to people, but I'm also a doodler. And the downfall of doodling is that people think that when you're doodling, you're not paying attention. Studies have found that doodling actually engages the extrahepatic neurowaves the same as if you were hand taking notes. So it is an engagement tool and it is useful. However, it's not perceived as that. So you got to watch what you're doing with your hands. Are you sitting there twiddling your hair, not really paying attention? Yeah, I can't twiddle my hair. There's not enough there to twiddle. I mean, and of course the dreaded pen click. You know, what do you do with your hands? Are you going to sit there and click a pen and click, click, click? That's annoying. You know, twiddling your thumbs can be kind of distracting too. So think about it this way. We got to do something that we figure out that works. You got to pay attention, lean in, do the things that you need to do. Now, let's talk about what we can do verbally to be an active listener. First and foremost, let's look at mirroring. This is the idea of repeating back to them verbatim. So when they're talking to you and you get a break, you can restate what you want to them. You can restate it, tell them back. So you said this, and you just literally say it right back to them. It's almost like a direct quote if you're thinking about papers, writing an essay. The next one is paraphrasing. Again, back to the essay, it's writing things in your own words. The thing about paraphrasing when you're listening is that not only are you restating what they said, but you're conveying also the emotions and details that were included. So you recognize that they were upset and you say that I see that you were mad when this happened. And these are things that happened. And we're talking about the red truck that went driving by at 32.3 miles per hour and all these things. So when I'm restating back to you, I'm including all of those details because that makes sure that that I know I'm hearing what you're saying, but also that you recognize that I am actually listening to you. Summarizing is the next step. The key difference between summarizing and paraphrasing is for paraphrasing, kick back the information and details. Summarizing is just catching the highlights, the main points. So when I'm in a mediation and I'm talking about landlord-tenant cases and they talked about all the things that they did, when I'm summarizing, I'm just going to say, okay, so let me get this straight. What we're looking for is back rent and possession and cleaning up of the yard. Is that what I understand? So I'm not worried about everybody being upset. I'm not worried about any of those things. Now I'm just worried about the specifics, the key points, the takeaways, the things that we're trying to resolve or the things that we're trying to talk about. Then we can look at reflecting. And it's the idea of mirroring or saying back. Like we said before, mirroring and restating and putting things back to them directly. Sometimes we have to mirror back emotions. And it's not that we're trying to say, you're mad, so I got to be mad. But it's the idea of putting words to those emotions. Sometimes I get that you're mad. It seems like you were very frustrated about that situation. Or when they do those things, it sounds like you're really joyous and happy that things are happening. We're putting words to emotions that they may not have actually thought through to the point of putting those words in place. So that's what we're doing in that one. Next, let's look at clarifying. So when you're trying to verify what was said, what was being done, ask questions. Ask open-ended questions. Those are those questions that can't necessarily be easily answered with just a single word. Let's face it, a teenager can answer anything with a grunt. But we're talking about those kind of things. So how did that make you feel? Sure, you could probably say mad, but odds are people are going to expound on that and carry on. Those are the kind of ideas. These are words that will get them to talk more, to let them pull out more. So you're asking questions, so you're leading them out, you're pulling them out of their shell, you're getting them to talk to you. The closed-ended questions, those are those that can be short, definitive responses. How many people were there? 3. What do you think about this? Things that you can do. Closed-ended questions. There's benefits to both. Obviously, open-ended questions helps them talk more. But if you're needing someone to wrap things up, you can go into closed-ended questions because they tend to lead people to come to a terminal end. So it breaks up the conversation. So you can ask a series of closed-ended questions, not like an interrogation, but just a couple. And that will actually wind it down a little more naturally. Next thing we're going to do is perception checking. And that's verifying that what you thought you heard or saw was what was intended. You got to be careful with these because you don't want to be too front. But if someone is sitting there with their arms crossed, maybe you want to make sure that if they're cold or if they're closed off or they're upset or they just don't know what to do with their hands. But this is the idea of perception checking. Instead of building assumptions based on your perceptions, you need to verify those perceptions to make sure they are correct. Then we're going to look at breaking up long monologues because we just talked about paraphrasing and summarizing. Sometimes they're going for quite a while and you need to break those up. Sometimes you got to paraphrase real quick, make sure you're on the same page. Sometimes you need to summarize as they're going along so that you can break those steps into something we can actually handleable. And then, of course, restating. This is the same thing as that mirror and reflecting we talked about earlier. It's going to restate what they said. You're going to try to get them to put in there. You're engaging them in their conversation so that you are listening to them fully. And the last but not least is reframing. We've done this in class. Sometimes you're reframing yourself because of what you're saying. Sometimes you're reframing something that they said. They said, I hate that person. It's horrible. They do these bad things. And what you're going to paraphrase back to them in a reframed statement is, if I understand you correctly, you get upset when these people do when these things happen. Does that make sense? You're going to convert these, not just what you said, but what they said as well, so that it can become much more smooth, much easier to understand, and you can help them see these things. And the whole point of this is so that people can believe that you are listening to them and that you are actually listening and getting what needs to be said.